She was just a waitress trying to survive the night shift when she heard the cry in the blizzard. She saved the baby, not knowing whose child it was. Days later, 200 bikers arrived at her door, and their leader hadn't come to threaten her. The neon sign of Highway 41. Diner buzzed and flickered against the howling darkness. Aisha Johnson wiped down the last table, her movements mechanical, practiced. Outside. The Wyoming blizzard had turned the highway into a white tomb. No cars had passed in 3 hours. She should have closed 2 hours ago. The wind screamed against the windows, rattling the glass in its frame. Aisha grabbed her coat from the hook, fingers fumbling with the zipper. Her breath came out in visible puffs. The heater was struggling against the cold seeping through every crack in the old building. Then she heard it. A cry. Faint, almost swallowed by the storm. Aisha froze, one arm in her coat sleeve. She tilted her head, listening. Nothing but wind. She shook her head, pulling her coat on fully. 5 years of working night shifts on this desolate highway had taught her that isolation played tricks on the mind. But there it was again, a weak, desperate wail cutting through the storm. "Jesus," she whispered, her pulse quickening. Every logical part of her brain screamed to ignore it. Going outside meant risking frostbite, maybe worse. The temperature had dropped to -15, and visibility was near 0. But that sound, that helpless, terrified sound, grabbed something deep in her chest and twisted. Aisha knew that kind of desperation. She yanked open the door, and the storm hit her like a physical force. Snow blasted her face, stinging her eyes. She squinted into the white chaos, searching for movement, for anything. "Hello?" Her voice was torn away by the wind. The crying came again, weaker now from somewhere to her left. Aisha stumbled off the diner's small porch, her boots sinking into knee-deep snow. The cold bit through her jeans immediately, burning her skin. She pushed forward, following the sound. 20 ft from the diner, she nearly fell into it. A car crumpled against an embankment, half buried in snow. The front end was accordioned against a concrete barrier. How long had it been there? How had she not heard the crash? The crying was coming from inside. "Hold on!" Aisha shouted, though she didn't know if anyone could hear her. She reached the passenger side and wiped frantically at the snow-covered window. Through the ice, she saw movement. Something small, wrapped in blankets in a car seat in the back. A baby. The driver's side was crushed inward, the airbag deployed and stained dark. Aisha could see the silhouette of someone slumped over the wheel, not moving. Her stomach lurched. She yanked at the passenger door, locked, the back door locked. Her fingers were already going numb. The baby's cries were growing weaker, more desperate. "No, no, no!" Aisha looked around wildly. A rock. She needed something heavy. She spotted a chunk of broken concrete near the barrier and grabbed it with both hands. Without hesitating, she slammed it against the passenger window. Once, twice. On the third hit, the glass spider webbed. The fourth blow shattered it inward. Aisha reached through, unlocking the door and wrenching it open. The interior light flickered on, and her worst fears were confirmed. The woman in the driver's seat was young, maybe 25. Her head rested against the deployed airbag at an unnatural angle, blood frozen across her temple. Her eyes were open, but empty, staring at nothing. Aisha had seen death before, 5 years ago, in another car on another dark road. She knew it instantly. "I'm sorry," Aisha whispered, her throat tight. "I'm so sorry." The baby's cry jerked her back to action. She reached into the back seat, her frozen fingers struggling with the car seat straps. The infant, she couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl, was bundled in a pink blanket, but its lips were turning blue. Its tiny face was red from crying, but the sound was growing fainter. "Come on, sweetheart, come on." Aisha's hands shook as she finally freed the car seat and lifted it out. The wind nearly knocked her over as she turned toward the diner. The light seemed impossibly far away, swallowed by sheets of blinding snow. Aisha tucked the car seat against her chest, hunching over it to shield the baby from the worst of the storm. Her legs screamed as she pushed through the drifts, each step in agony of cold and effort. She didn't know how long it took to reach the door. 30 seconds? Or 30 minutes? Time had stopped meaning anything. But then she was inside, slamming the door behind her, the sudden warmth of the diner burning her frozen skin. The baby had stopped crying. "No, no, wake up! Please, wake up!" Aisha set the car seat on the nearest table and unwrapped the blankets with clumsy, shaking hands. The infant was a girl, maybe 6 months old, her skin pale and cold to the touch. Aisha pressed her ear to the tiny chest. A heartbeat, faint, but there. She had to warm her up fast. Aisha's mind raced. The first aid training she'd gotten for this job seemed useless now. She grabbed every clean towel from behind the counter and wrapped them around the baby, then carried her to the kitchen. The coffee pot's heating plate was still on. She turned it to maximum and held the bundle near it. Not too close, just enough to radiate warmth. "Come on, baby. Come on." Aisha rubbed the tiny hands gently, trying to get circulation going. "You're okay. You're safe now." Minutes crawled by. Aisha kept warming, rubbing, whispering encouragement. Her own body was starting to shake from the adrenaline crash and residual cold, but she didn't stop. Then, a whimper, weak but real. The baby's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Then she began to cry again, a stronger, angrier sound, the most beautiful sound Aisha had ever heard. "That's it. That's it, sweetheart. You cry all you want." Tears streamed down Aisha's face, hot against her frozen cheeks. She cradled the baby close, still wrapped in towels, and sank into a chair. Outside, the storm raged on. The phone lines were dead. She'd already checked. Her cell had no signal. The highway was impassable. They were alone until morning at the earliest. Aisha looked down at the baby, now sucking on her tiny fist, her color slowly returning. In those dark eyes, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 5 years. A second chance. She thought about the woman in the car, a mother who'd driven into a storm and never made it out. About another car, another storm 5 years ago, when Aisha had been behind the wheel, when her sister had been in the passenger seat, when everything had shattered. "I've got you now," Aisha whispered to the baby. "I promise, I've got you." She didn't know that this promise would bring 200 motorcycles to her door. She didn't know that this one act of mercy would drag her into a world of violence, loyalty, and redemption. She didn't know that the baby she held belonged to one of the most dangerous men in Wyoming. All she knew was that for the first time in 5 years, she'd saved a life instead of taking one. And maybe, just maybe, that counted for something. Dawn broke gray and cold over Highway 41. The storm had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a landscape of white silence. Aisha hadn't slept. She'd spent the night feeding the baby sugar water from a clean eyedropper, keeping her warm, singing songs she half remembered from her own childhood. The baby, she'd been calling her sweetheart all night, had finally fallen into a peaceful sleep in a makeshift bed of towels inside an empty storage crate. Aisha was mixing another batch of sugar water when she heard the engines. 2 sheriff's vehicles and an ambulance carved through the snowdrifts, their lights flashing red and blue against the white. Aisha's chest tightened. She'd known they'd come eventually, but now that they were here, she felt a strange reluctance to let the baby go. Sheriff Tom Riley was first through the door, his weathered face creased with concern. "Aisha, we got a distress signal from a car's emergency system around midnight. Took us till now to reach this stretch." His eyes found the baby in the crate. "Jesus Christ, is that?" "She's okay," Aisha said quickly. "Cold when I found her, but she's okay now." 2 paramedics rushed past her to the baby. Aisha stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as they began their examination. She felt hollow, suddenly watching them work. "There was a woman," she said quietly, "in the car. She didn't make it." Sheriff Riley's face darkened. He radioed something to his deputy, then turned back to Aisha. "You went out in that storm." "Aisha, that was stupid." "I know." She managed a weak smile, "but I heard her crying." "That was brave." Riley put a hand on her shoulder. "You saved this little girl's life." One of the paramedics, a young black woman with kind eyes, approached them. "She's stable. Mild hypothermia but no frostbite. Another hour out there." She didn't finish the sentence. "You did good. Really good." "I'm riding with her," Aisha said. It wasn't a question. Riley nodded. "Ambulance will take you both to County General. Get that hand looked at." Aisha glanced down at her right hand. The skin was mottled red and white frostbite from when she'd broken the window. She hadn't even felt it. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Aisha sat in the back of the ambulance, watching the paramedics work, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall. They'd wrapped her in thermal blankets, started in 4. Professional, efficient, gentle. At the hospital, they tried to separate them. Aisha refused to leave until she knew the baby was truly safe. A nurse finally brought her to a treatment room, where a doctor examined her hand, tisking about nerve damage and applying ointment that burned like fire. "You'll keep full function," the doctor said, "but you're lucky. Another 10 minutes of exposure." "I know," Aisha interrupted. She'd heard enough about what could have happened. Sheriff Riley found her in the waiting area an hour later. His expression had changed harder now, guarded. He sat down heavily beside her. "The woman in the car was Rebecca Harlan," he said, his voice low. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Aisha shook her head. "She was married to Luke Harlan. They call him Hawk." Riley watched her face carefully. "Leader of the Black Storm Riders. You heard of them? Something cold settled in Aisha's stomach? The motorcycle club? The one under federal investigation for trafficking, racketeering, and about a dozen other charges?" "Yeah." Riley rubbed his face. "Hawk just got out of prison 3 weeks ago. Manslaughter charge. Did 18 months. Aisha looked toward the pediatric ward where they'd taken the baby. "That's his daughter, Rosie. That's her name. Rosie Harlan." Riley leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. "FBI's been watching Rebecca for months. They think she was running. From what or who, they won't say. But a woman doesn't drive into a blizzard at midnight for no reason." "She was trying to protect her baby," Aisha said softly, understanding blooming in her chest. A mother's last desperate act. Maybe Riley stood up. "Look, the press is going to be all over this by tomorrow. Waitress saves infant in blizzard. It's a good story, but there are parts they don't need to know. Parts that might. Parts about my record. Aisha finished. 5 years hadn't erased the DUI conviction, hadn't brought her sister back. Riley's silence was confirmation enough. "The baby's safe," Aisha said, standing. "That's what matters." But as she walked toward the exit, her legs unsteady with exhaustion, she couldn't shake the image of Rebecca Harlan's frozen face, a mother who died protecting her child. Aisha had taken a life 5 years ago, her own sister's through recklessness and stupidity. Now she'd saved one. The universe was offering her something. She wasn't sure if it was redemption or a reckoning. Outside, fresh snow had begun to fall. Aisha pulled her coat tight and headed for the parking lot where her old truck waited. She didn't notice the black motorcycle parked 3 spaces down or the man in leather watching her from behind tinted sunglasses. She didn't know that Hawk Harlan had already heard about the waitress who'd saved his daughter or that he was coming for her. The story hit the local news by evening. By the next morning, it had gone regional. By day 3, Aisha's face was everywhere. Local hero waitress risks life to save infant in blizzard. Aisha stared at the newspaper lying on the diner counter, her own photo staring back, taken from her employee file, years old. She looked younger in it, less tired. The bell above the door hadn't stopped chiming. People she'd served coffee to for 5 years were suddenly treating her like something fragile and precious. Strangers drove out from town just to shake her hand. A woman from the Baptist church had brought a casserole. Someone left flowers on the diner steps. Aisha hated every second of it. "You're famous," said Carla, the morning shift cook, grinning as she flipped pancakes. "My daughter saw you on Facebook. 15,000 shares." "Great," Aisha muttered, refilling the coffee pot. But fame was a double-edged blade, and the second edge cut deeper. By day 2, someone had found her criminal record. By day 3, the headlines had shifted. Hero waitress has dark past. DUI killed her sister 5 years ago. From tragedy to triumph, ex-con's road to redemption. Aisha had stopped reading after that. She'd unplugged her phone. She'd started parking behind the diner to avoid the news vans that occasionally cruised past. Now, on the 4th morning after the storm, she was alone in the diner at 5:00 a.m., preparing for the breakfast rush and trying to pretend the world hadn't turned her inside out. The rumble of a motorcycle made her freeze. Then another and another. Aisha moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. 3 motorcycles sat in the parking lot, their riders standing beside them. Black leather, chrome gleaming in the pre-dawn light. They weren't doing anything threatening, just standing there looking at the diner. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. "Sheriff's Department," Riley answered on the second ring. "Tom, there are bikers outside the diner." A pause. "What kind of bikers?" "The kind with skull patches on their jackets. Lock the doors. I'm 10 minutes out." Aisha locked the doors and retreated behind the counter, her heart hammering. Through the window, she watched the bikers. They didn't approach, didn't leave, just waited. When Riley arrived, sirens off, but lights flashing, the bikers mounted their motorcycles and left without a word. "Black Storm riders," Riley confirmed, standing in the diner with his hand on his holster. Bottom rockers said, "Wyoming chapter." "What do they want?" Aisha asked, though she already knew. Riley looked at her for a long moment. "Hawk Harlan got out of prison. Word is he's been looking into what happened to Rebecca." "And who saved his daughter?" "I just did what anyone would." Aisha Riley cut her off gently. "These aren't anyone. The Black Storm riders don't forget debts." good or bad. That night, Aisha returned to her trailer on the edge of town. It was a rusted single-wide she rented for $400 a month, all she could afford on diner wages. She'd lived there since her release, keeping her head down, staying invisible. So much for invisible. She was unlocking her door when she noticed it. A single white lily lying on her doorstep. No note, no card, just the flower, perfect and pristine against the dirty snow. Aisha picked it up with shaking hands and looked around. The trailer park was quiet, just the wind rattling through chain-link fences and the distant sound of the highway. Someone had been here. Someone knew where she lived. Inside, she locked every lock and pulled the curtains. She put the lily in a glass of water because throwing it away felt wrong somehow. Then sat on her threadbare couch in the dark. Her phone, still plugged in, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for saving my daughter. I'm coming to pay my respects. H." Aisha stared at the message until her eyes blurred. She should call Riley. She should leave town. She should do anything except sit here waiting for a biker gang leader to show up on her doorstep. But she thought about Rebecca Harlan's frozen face, about Rosie's tiny fingers clutching her thumb in the ambulance, about the lily on her doorstep, a gesture that felt more like reverence than threat. She texted back with trembling fingers, when the response came immediately soon. "Don't be afraid." Aisha laughed, a short, bitter sound in the darkness of her trailer. Don't be afraid. As if fear was a choice. As if she hadn't been afraid every day for 5 years, waiting for the universe to collect what she owed for her sister's death. Maybe this was it. Maybe Hawk Harlan wasn't coming to thank her. Maybe he was coming to even the scales. Outside in the distance, Aisha heard the low rumble of motorcycles. Not close, not yet, but coming. They came on the 6th day. Aisha was pouring coffee for a trucker when she heard it. A sound like distant thunder growing steadily louder. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks clattered against plates. Everyone in the diner turned towards the windows. The rumble became a roar. They appeared on Highway 41 like a black river flowing down the highway in perfect formation. 2 by 2, stretching back farther than Aisha could see. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. "Sweet Jesus," the trucker whispered. The lead bikes turned into the diner parking lot. Then the next pair, and the next. They kept coming, filling every available space, spilling onto the shoulder of the highway. The sound was deafening even through the windows, a symphony of engines that shook the building's foundation. People were already fleeing. The trucker threw money on the counter and hurried out the back. A family with 2 kids scrambled for their minivan. Within 60 seconds, Aisha was alone in the diner. Just her and 200 bikers outside. She should run. She should call Riley. She should do anything except stand frozen behind the counter, watching through the window as the engines cut off one by one, leaving a silence that felt even more terrifying than the noise. The bikers dismounted. Black leather and denim, patches and chains. Men and women, young and old, all of them wearing the same insignia, a crowned skull with spread wings, black storm riders. They formed lines on either side of the parking lot, creating a corridor from the highway to the diner entrance. Then he arrived. The motorcycle was bigger than the others, a custom beast of chrome and black metal. The man who rode it was tall and lean, his dark hair pulled back, his face hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He wore a leather vest over a black shirt, and even from a distance, Aisha could see the president's patch on his chest. Hawk Harlan. He dismounted slowly, deliberately. Another biker handed him something, a bouquet of white lilies, at least 24, wrapped in simple paper. Aisha's breath caught the same flowers that had appeared on her doorstep. Hawk walked toward the diner, his boots crunching on the snow-dusted pavement. The other bikers remained perfectly still, watching, not menacing, not celebrating, just waiting. Aisha's survival instinct finally kicked in. She moved to lock the door, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. Before she could reach it, Hawk was there pulling it open. Aisha Johnson. His voice was deep, rough around the edges. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He stepped inside and removed his sunglasses. His eyes were gray, lined with exhaustion and something else, profound sadness. He looked at her for a long moment, and Aisha saw her own pain reflected back at her. "I'm Luke Harlan," he said quietly. "People call me Hawk. I know who you are. Then you know why I'm here." He held out the lilies. "These were my wife's favorite. Rebecca! She—" His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. She loved white lilies. Aisha took the flowers with trembling hands. They were real, fresh, probably cost a fortune this time of year. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said. "I tried to. I saw her, but she was already—" "I know." Hawk's jaw tightened. "You saved my daughter. That's what matters. You went into a storm that killed my wife, and you brought Rosie out alive. There aren't words for that kind of debt." "I didn't do it for I know that too." He gestured toward the window, toward the silent army of bikers outside. "We came to pay our respects, to say thank you properly." Aisha watched as the bikers began moving. Each one reached into their jacket or vest and pulled out a single white lily. They approached the diner in silence, placing their flowers on the steps, on the windowsills, along the railing of the small porch. One by one, 200 flowers appeared, transforming the shabby diner into something almost beautiful. "My brothers and sisters wanted to show you what it means when someone saves one of ours," Hawk said. "You gave me back my daughter. You gave her a future. That makes you family." "I'm not." Aisha's voice broke. "I'm not a good person. You should know that. 5 years ago." "I know about your sister," Hawk interrupted gently. "I know about the accident. I know you went to prison. I know everything, Aisha." She looked up at him, tears burning her eyes. "Then, you know, I don't deserve. Hawk's laugh was bitter. "I just did 18 months for killing a man in a bar fight. Half my club has records longer than their arms. We don't talk about deserving. We talk about what you do when it matters. And when it mattered, you saved my baby girl." He pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. He handed it to Aisha. It showed Rosie in a hospital bed, awake and alert, clutching a stuffed bear. Someone had written on the back, "Thank you for my tomorrow." Aisha pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. "Keep it," Hawk said. "Remember that you did something that can't be undone. Something good." Outside, the bikers were mounting their motorcycles again. The visit was ending as quickly as it had begun. But as Hawk turned to leave, Aisha grabbed his arm. "Wait, your wife? She was running, wasn't she? From someone?" Hawk's expression darkened. "Yeah, she was. Is Rosie safe now?" He met her eyes, and Aisha saw the truth there before he spoke. "Not yet." The FBI arrived 2 hours after the bikers left. Agent Sarah Chen was small, sharp-eyed, and clearly annoyed. Her partner, Agent Morrison, was tall and silent, taking notes while Chen paced the diner. 200 members of a known criminal organization show up at your workplace, and you didn't think to call the police." Chen's voice was ice. Aisha wiped down the counter for the third time. They brought flowers. It wasn't exactly a raid. Luke Harlan is under federal investigation. His wife was a person of interest in a trafficking case, and now she's dead. Chen stopped pacing, fixing Aisha with a stare. You don't find that convenient? Convenient? Aisha's temper flared. A woman died. A baby almost froze to death. Where's the convenience in that? Morrison spoke for the first time. We believe Rebecca Harlan was trying to turn state's witness. She had information about routes, contacts, distribution networks. 3 days before she died, she contacted our office. The words landed like stones in Aisha's stomach. You think someone killed her? Made it look like an accident. We think the storm was real, but opportunity makes for strange coincidences, Chen said. And now Hawk Harlan is making a very public show of gratitude. Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe he's using you to send a message to whoever killed his wife. What message? That he knows? That he's watching? That he's coming for them? Chen leaned against the counter. Has he contacted you since this morning? Aisha thought about the photograph in her pocket. Rosie's face smiling up at her. No. Chen didn't look convinced, but she handed Aisha a card. When he does, not if. When. You call me. These people are dangerous, Miss Johnson, even the grateful ones. After they left, Aisha locked up early. The diner smelled like lilies, overwhelming and sweet. She'd had to throw most of them away. There were too many, and they were already wilting in the heat. She was walking to her truck when a motorcycle pulled up beside her. Not Hawk, a woman older with silver streaking her dark hair and sharp lines around her eyes. Her jacket marked her as Black Storm Riders, but her patch said, Road Captain. Name's Val, the woman said, cutting the engine. Hawk sent me. Aisha's hand tightened on her keys. Why? To talk somewhere private. Val glanced around the empty parking lot. Your place or mine? 20 minutes later, they sat in Aisha's trailer. Val accepted the offered coffee, but didn't drink it. Just held the mug like she needed something to do with her hands. Rebecca called me the night she died, Val said without preamble. She was scared. Said someone had found out she'd talked to the FBI. Said she was taking Rosie and running. Who found out? That's the question, isn't it? Val's expression was grim. Could be the people she was going to testify against. Could be someone in our club who didn't want that heat. Could be the FBI themselves. They're not above cleaning up loose ends. Aisha felt cold. What does this have to do with me? Hawk's been tracking Rebecca's last movements. The crash site, the angle of impact, the road conditions. None of it makes sense for an accident. Someone ran her off the road. Then he should go to the police. Val laughed, bitter and sharp. The same police who've been trying to put him away for 10 years. The same ones who'd love any excuse to violate his parole. She set down the coffee. No, Hawk settles his own debts. That's insane. He'll go back to prison. Maybe if he gets caught, Val leaned forward. But here's the thing. Rosie's still in danger. Whoever killed Rebecca did it to stop her from talking. As long as that threat exists, that baby isn't safe. Child Services has her now, but they're processing foster placement. Hawk's got a record. His parole terms won't let him take custody yet. Aisha's chest tightened. Where is she? County facility, 40 minutes from here. Social worker named Mrs. Patterson has the case. Val pulled out a folded paper and set it on the table. Hawk wants to know if you'd consider being Rosie's emergency foster placement. Temporary. Just until he can get his custody rights. You're joking. I'm not. You saved her life. You have no record of violence. You're employed, housed, and the only person Rosie's been comfortable with since Rebecca died. Val's eyes were steady. The social worker would approve it if you applied. Aisha stared at the paper. An application for emergency foster care. Her mind reeled. This is crazy. I work 60-hour weeks. I live in a trailer. I'm barely keeping myself together. You kept Rosie alive through a blizzard. I think you can handle a few weeks. Val stood. Think about it. But think fast. Hawk's going after whoever killed Rebecca. When he does, things are going to get messy. That little girl needs to be somewhere safe with me. Aisha's laugh was hollow. I'm the woman who killed her own sister. Val paused at the door. And now you're the woman who saved someone else's daughter. Maybe it's time you decided which one defines you. After Val left, Aisha sat in the silence of her trailer, staring at the application. Outside, night was falling, and with it came fresh snow, small flakes drifting past her window like ghosts. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Please, she knows your voice. She stops crying when she hears it. Aisha closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw Rosie's tiny hand clutching her finger, felt the weight of that trust, that innocence. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the social worker's card. Rosie moved into Aisha's trailer. 3 days later, the social worker, Mrs. Patterson, a round woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes, walked through the tiny space, checking smoke detectors and cabinet locks. Aisha had spent 48 hours cleaning, baby-proofing, and setting up a borrowed crib in the corner of her bedroom. It's small, Mrs. Patterson said, but it's clean and safe. That's what matters. She handed Rosie to Aisha, and the baby immediately stopped fussing, her tiny fingers wrapping around Aisha's collar. See, she knows you. Aisha felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a physical thing. 6 months old, so small, so vulnerable. I'll check in weekly, Mrs. Patterson continued, and Mr. Harlan's parole officer has been notified. No unsupervised visits, but he can see her with you present. After she left, Aisha stood in her trailer holding Rosie, suddenly terrified. What had she done? She didn't know anything about babies. She worked nights. She could barely take care of herself. But Rosie looked up at her with Rebecca's dark eyes and smiled. Okay, Aisha whispered. Okay, we'll figure this out. The first week was chaos. Sleepless nights, formula mixing, diaper changes. At 3 a.m., Carla covered some of Aisha's shifts at the diner. Val stopped by twice with supplies and advice. Hawk came once, sitting stiffly in Aisha's cramped living room, holding his daughter with the desperate gentleness of a man who'd lost everything. Thank you, he said quietly, as Rosie gripped his finger. I know this isn't easy. Are you any closer to finding who? Aisha stopped, glancing at the baby. Hawk's jaw tightened. We're working on it. That was 8 days ago. Now Aisha was driving through fresh snow on Highway 41, Rosie secured in a car seat behind her, when she saw the motorcycles ahead. Not black storm riders, different patches, different colors. They were blocking the road. 3 bikes spread across both lanes. Aisha's heart lurched. She slowed, her mind racing. The abandoned truck stop was a mile ahead. Behind her, nothing but empty highway. The bikers didn't move. She grabbed her phone. No signal. The storm that had rolled in an hour ago was disrupting everything. She was alone. One of the bikers, a massive man with a red beard, dismounted and walked toward her truck. Aisha locked the doors, her pulse hammering. He knocked on her window. Aisha Johnson. She didn't answer. We just want to talk about Hawk Harlan, about what his wife knew." In the back seat, Rosie started to cry. "I don't know anything," Aisha said through the glass. "Then you're going to help us find out?" Redbeard's smile was cruel. That baby's good leverage. Terror shot through Aisha's veins. She slammed the truck into reverse, but another motorcycle had appeared behind her, cutting off her escape. She was boxed in. Redbeard reached for the door handle. Aisha made a choice. She yanked the wheel hard right and floored the accelerator. The truck lurched off the road, plowing through the shallow ditch and onto the snowy field beyond. The bikers shouted, scrambling for their motorcycles, but Aisha had a head start. The truck fishtailed wildly. Rosie screamed. Aisha fought the wheel, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The old truck wasn't built for off-roading, but it was heavy and had four-wheel drive. She aimed for the tree line 100 yards ahead. Behind her, headlights appeared. The motorcycles were faster, gaining ground. Aisha's mind raced. The abandoned truck stopped. Hawk had mentioned it once, said his club used it as a neutral meeting point. If she could reach it, if any of his people were there, she burst through the tree line onto a service road, the truck's undercarriage scraping. The truck stop appeared ahead, dark and empty-looking. But there in the back lot, 4 motorcycles with the crowned skull insignia. Aisha laid on the horn and flashed her lights. The pursuing bikes were right behind her now. She could see Redbeard in her mirror, reaching into his jacket. Then the truck stop's garage door exploded open. Black storm riders poured out. Hawk in front, Val beside him. They spread across the lot, cutting off the pursuers. Aisha slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding to a stop. She twisted around to check Rosie, who was crying but unhurt, still strapped safely in her seat. Hawk appeared at her window. "You hurt?" Aisha shook her head, her whole body trembling. "Stay in the truck." His eyes were ice. "Lock the doors. Don't come out until I tell you." What happened next was fast and brutal. Shouts the crack of something hard hitting metal, a gunshot that made Aisha flinch and cover Rosie with her body. Then silence. Hawk opened her door, blood on his knuckles. "They're gone for now." "Who were they?" Aisha's voice shook. "The Scorpions. They work for the people Rebecca was going to testify against." Hawk looked at Rosie, his face twisting. "They know I'm closing in. They wanted leverage. They almost got it, but they didn't. Because you drove like a demon through a snowstorm." Hawk almost smiled. "Seems to be your specialty." Val appeared, phone in hand. "Cops are coming. And the FBI. This is going to get complicated." Aisha looked down at Rosie, finally calming in her car seat. She thought about what Agent Chen had said, that Hawk might use her to send a message. But sitting here with this baby alive and safe, Aisha realized the message wasn't from Hawk. It was from her. She'd been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it hiding. "Tell me how to help," she said. The FBI arrived with sirens screaming, but the Scorpions were already gone, scattered into the storm like ghosts. Agent Chen took one look at Aisha's truck, at Rosie crying in the car seat, at Hawk's bloodied knuckles, and her expression went cold. "This is exactly what I warned you about," she said. Aisha held Rosie close, the baby's face pressed against her shoulder. "They came for her." "What was I supposed to do? Call the police? Not drive to a biker gang for protection?" Chen turned to Hawk. "You're on parole, Mr. Harlan. Being present at a violent altercation violates your terms. Saving a baby from kidnappers violates my terms." Hawk's voice was dangerously quiet. Morrison stepped between them. "We've got 3 Scorpions in custody." They're talking, Harlan. Saying, "You've been running your own investigation, interfering with a federal case. My wife is dead. Someone murdered her." Hawk's composure cracked. "You think I'm going to sit back and wait for you to do nothing? We're building a case. Too slow." Val appeared from the garage, her phone in hand. "We've got names, locations. The Scorpions run distribution for the Vulov syndicate. Russians out of Billings. Rebecca had evidence, texts, photos, shipping manifests. She was their bookkeeper before she met Hawk. She knew everything." Chen's expression sharpened. "Where's this evidence?" "That's what everyone wants to know," Hawk said. "Rebecca hid it before she ran somewhere she thought was safe." Aisha's mind raced, pieces clicking together. "The car. Did anyone search the car thoroughly?" Everyone turned to look at her. "After I got Rosie out, I didn't look at anything else. I was focused on keeping her alive." Aisha's heart pounded. "But what if Rebecca hid something in the car? Something the police missed?" Chen and Morrison exchanged glances. The vehicle's in the impound lot. Morrison said, "We went through it, but we were looking for accident evidence, not." "Then look again," Aisha interrupted. She was running for her life. She wouldn't have left that evidence behind. She would have kept it close. 2 hours later, they stood in the impound lot under harsh fluorescent lights. The wrecked car looked even worse in the brightness. The driver's side completely destroyed, the interior still stained with Rebecca's blood. Aisha hung back, holding Rosie, not wanting to get closer to that tomb. Val and 2 other Black Storm members worked alongside the FBI, pulling apart seats, checking panels, examining every inch. Hawk stood rigid, watching his face a mask. "Nothing," Morrison finally said, frustrated. "There's nothing here." "The car seat." Aisha's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Everyone turned. When I pulled Rosie out, the car seat was buckled in tight. Really tight. Like it had been secured by someone who wanted to make absolutely sure it wouldn't move. Aisha looked at Rosie in her arms. What if that's where Rebecca hid it? They'd brought the car seat to the trailer as part of Rosie's things. It was sitting in Aisha's bedroom right now. The convoy that formed back to Aisha's trailer was surreal. FBI vehicles, police cars, and 4 Black Storm motorcycles all racing through the snow. When they burst through her door, Aisha felt violated and grateful all at once. Val practically tore the car seat apart. Behind the padding, secured with duct tape, was a waterproof pouch. Inside, a thumb drive and a burner phone. Chen's hands shook slightly as she examined them. "This is it. This is what we need. What's on it?" Hawk demanded. Morrison scrolled through the phone's photos. Shipping routes, coded conversations, photos of containers at the docks. Enough to bring down the entire network. The Vulovs, their distribution chain, their money laundering operations. "It's all here." "Then arrest them." Hawk said, "Tonight, before they come for my daughter again, we need to verify everything. Coordinate with other agencies tonight." Hawk's voice was still, or I handle it myself. Chen looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Morrison, make the calls. We move in 3 hours." The operation happened at dawn. Aisha watched the news with Rosie in her lap. Federal agents raiding multiple locations across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. 17 arrests, millions in seized assets. The Vulov syndicate dismantled in a single coordinated strike. But victory had a price. During the chaos, 2 Scorpions, desperate and cornered, made one last play. They came to Highway 41, looking for leverage, for anything to bargain with. They found the diner instead. Aisha got the call from Carla at 6:00 a.m. The diners. Oh God, Aisha. They shot it up. There's glass everywhere, bullet holes. Aisha arrived to find the building still standing, but wounded. Windows shattered, bullet holes stitching across the walls. The neon sign that had buzzed for 30 years was dark, its tubes shattered. Sheriff Riley met her outside. They're in custody. Tried to take hostages, but the place was empty. Could have been so much worse. Aisha stood in the parking lot, holding Rosie, staring at the broken building. This place had been her sanctuary for 5 years. The place where she'd rebuilt her life, piece by piece. Now it was caught in someone else's war. Hawk arrived an hour later. He walked through the destruction in silence, Val and a dozen other riders behind him. "We did this," he finally said. "This is on us." "You saved Rosie," Aisha replied. "That's what matters." Hawk turned to her, then to his club. "Brothers, sisters, we owe a debt, and Black Storm Riders pay their debts." He looked at the shattered diner. "We rebuild all of it, better than before." The sound of hammers echoed across Highway 41 for 3 weeks straight. They came at dawn. 30, sometimes 40 Black Storm Riders trading their leather for work gloves. Val organized the crews. Hawk worked alongside them, measuring, cutting, welding. Others arrived with supplies, new windows, fresh paint, lumber, chrome fixtures. Aisha watched from across the parking lot, Rosie on her hip as the diner transformed. "You don't have to do this," she'd told Hawk that first morning. "Yeah," he'd replied, pulling on work gloves. "We do." The locals kept their distance at first, suspicious of the bikers, frightened by the violence. But suspicion faded as days passed. The bikers bought supplies from the hardware store, ate at the other diner in town, paid for everything in cash. Some brought their families, wives, kids, old ladies who set up folding chairs and watched their men work. By the second week, townspeople started showing up with coffee and sandwiches. By the third week, a few local contractors joined the effort, unable to resist a good project. The diner rose from its ruins like something new. Fresh siding replaced the bullet-scarred walls. New windows gleamed. Inside, they'd refinished the counters, replaced torn booths, updated the kitchen equipment. Val had somehow sourced a vintage jukebox that now stood in the corner, but the crown jewel was the sign. Hawk had commissioned it specially, a custom neon masterpiece that combined the diner's original design with something new. The words, Highway 41 Diner, glowed in warm yellow, but beneath it in smaller script, Home of the Guardian. "Guardian?" Aisha had asked when she saw the design. "That's what you are," Hawk said simply. "You guard people. You saved Rosie. You drove through hell to keep her safe. That means something." On the morning of the reopening, Aisha stood in the parking lot wearing a clean apron, Rosie in a carrier on her chest. The baby was 8 months old now, stronger, smiling more. The custody hearing was scheduled for next week. Hawk's parole officer had recommended he regain full custody, and Aisha would transition back to being just the woman who'd saved her. Just as if there was anything just about it. "You ready?" Carla asked, grinning. She'd stayed through everything, refusing to abandon her post. "No," Aisha admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The grand reopening drew a crowd, locals, truckers, reporters, and of course, the Black Storm Riders. 200 motorcycles lined Highway 41, just like they had that first morning. But this time there was no fear. Kids ran between the bikes while their parents took photos. Val organized a raffle proceeds going to the local children's hospital. Hawk arrived last alone this time, carrying a small frame. He found Aisha inside, arranging the counter. "Got something for you," he said. The frame held a photo, one Aisha hadn't known existed. It showed her in the hospital, exhausted and frostbitten, her ruined hand wrapped in bandages. But she was smiling down at Rosie, who was clutching her finger with tiny, perfect determination. "The paramedic took it," Hawk explained. "She sent it to me after the news broke. Thought you should have it." Aisha's throat tightened. In the photo, she didn't look like an ex-con or a woman haunted by guilt. She looked like exactly what Hawk had called her, a guardian. "Hang it above the register," Hawk said. "Reminds people what this place is about." The photo went up, and beside it, Hawk placed a shadow box containing a single white lily. Preserved eternal. "For Rebecca?" Aisha asked softly. For all of us who needed a second chance, Hawk looked around the rebuilt diner. "She made mistakes. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. But in the end, what matters is what we do when someone needs us." The day blurred into a celebration. Coffee flowed freely. Carla's pancakes disappeared as fast as she could make them. The jukebox played old country songs. Children laughed. Bikers traded stories with truckers. Agent Chen even stopped by off-duty and managed to smile when Aisha served her pie. As sunset painted the sky orange and pink, the crowd thinned. Aisha stood outside, Rosie drowsy against her chest, watching the last customers leave. The new neon sign flickered to life, casting warm light across the snow. Hawk emerged, pulling on his leather jacket. "Next Monday, the hearing." "I know. She'll always know what you did for her. I'll make sure of that." Aisha looked down at Rosie, whose eyes were closing. "I'll visit if that's okay." "More than okay. You're family now. That doesn't change." Hawk mounted his motorcycle, then paused. "Thank you, Aisha, for everything." "Thank you," she replied, "for reminding me I could be more than my worst day." She watched him ride away, his tail light disappearing down Highway 41. Other bikes followed Val, the crew, the club. The rumble faded into the distance until only silence remained. Aisha carried Rosie inside, past the photo on the wall, past the preserved lily, past all the evidence of destruction and rebuilding. She locked the door and turned off most of the lights, leaving only the sign glowing outside. As she settled into a booth with Rosie sleeping in her arms, she realized something had shifted. The guilt that had lived in her chest for 5 years, the crushing weight of her sister's death, was still there. It would always be there, but now it had company, hope, purpose, and the knowledge that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a choice you made every day. Outside, a late-night trucker pulled into the lot, drawn by the warm glow of the sign. He'd heard about this place, about the guardian who'd saved a baby in a snowstorm, about the bikers who'd rebuilt a diner, about second chances that started on a dark highway. He pushed open the door, bell chiming. Aisha looked up and smiled. "Welcome to Highway 41 Diner," she said. "Coffee is fresh." And somewhere in the distance, like a promise or a prayer, came the faint rumble of motorcycles returning home.